Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin, Tjong-Alvares with a look at what's going on in the global economy today. Coming up, a look at the economic resilience of Charlie Hebdo and Gaza's ongoing economic struggles. First, the headlines. European stocks rose for a second day on Thursday on expectations monetary policies by the European Central Bank and Federal Reserve will support the economy. Shares were boosted as inflation data fell below zero for the first time in 5 years, bolstering the case for the ECB to begin quantitative easing. The Stoxx Europe 600 index advanced 2% to 340 in early afternoon trading in London, but is still more than 3% down from an almost 7-year high reached last month. The Standard & Poor's 500 index on Wednesday rose the most in 3 weeks on indications interest rates are unlikely to rise before late April. Minutes from the Federal Reserve's policy meeting in December show most officials are in agreement to keep U.S. interest rates low until at least April. Members of the Federal Open Market Committee agreed the timing of the first rate rise would depend on economic data. Fed officials, however, believe the international situation could drag down domestic real activity and employment. The committee expects interest rates of 1 to 1.25% and inflation of 1.3% by the end of 2015. Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed to invest $250 billion in Latin America over the next 10 years. Xi said in a speech to the heads of Latin American and Caribbean states that two-way trade was estimated to rise to $500 billion within 10 years. China currently buys oil from Venezuela, copper from Peru and Chile, and soybeans from Argentina and Brazil. But for Venezuela's struggling economy, which is plagued by crashing oil prices and spiraling inflation, China may be its only hope for the future.
I think Maduro will come back empty-handed from China, just as Foreign Minister Rafael Ramirez did. The Chinese will demand much more than the International Monetary Fund could. The IMF requires compliance with certain policies. The Chinese demand compliance with its own policies and real guarantees before giving credit.
Samsung Electronics said it expects its fourth quarter profit to drop 37% as it struggles with increased competition. The decline would mark the fifth consecutive quarterly drop for the world's largest maker of smartphones. The South Korean electronics giant estimates its operating profit for the quarter will be $4.7 billion. Samsung forecasts its sales for the quarter likely fell about 12% year over year to $47 billion. Smartphone shipments, which account for 2/3 of Samsung's operating profit, face fierce competition from low-cost handset vendors Xiaomi and Huawei. By now, everyone is aware of the terror attack at the Paris office of French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, but little has been said about the unbeaten resilience of this provocative newspaper in its struggle to remain solvent for the past 4 decades. More in this report.
France mourns the death of Walensky, Cabot, Charbonneau. Among the other satirical journalists of the country, a large part of the French satirical press is now dead. 40 years of funny, impertinent, and politically engaged caricatures are no more. At its inception, the magazine was part of Harakiri newspaper. In 1969, Kavanagh, one of France's leading journalists, gathered his friends Gebe, Cabot, and Professor Choron. Together, they funded Harakiri Hebdo, a weekly magazine that never hesitated to tackle political leadership, most especially General de Gaulle. In 1970, when de Gaulle deceased, the magazine did not hesitate to publish macabre jokes. Banned from publication and wishing to circumvent censors, Harakiri changed its name, and as a wink at its favorite target, Charles de Gaulle, it was named Charlie Hebdo. Always insolent, funny, and subversive, Charlie Hebdo stopped at nothing, until the crash. In 1980, with no readers and no income, Charlie closed down. Thanks to Walensky, Philippe Val, Cabot, and the French pop singer Renaud, Charlie Hebdo was revived in 1992. Same format, same writers, and a stronger leftist orientation, mostly fighting against extremism of all kinds. In 2006, Charlie Hebdo decided to publish a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad as an act of solidarity with a Danish magazine, which printed a caricature despite the controversy that surrounded the publication. In 2007, the cover of Charlie Hebdo showed a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad weeping and lamenting that only assholes loved him, causing once again a general outcry, and the magazine was marked as a target by Islamist extremists. A Molotov cocktail was thrown at the offices in November 2011, burning it down. But that did not succeed in intimidating the magazine's editorial board. In 2012, on its front page, Charlie Hebdo made once again fun of those who do not accept to be made fun of. As the Muslim world screamed, France was forced to strengthen security at all its official institutions abroad. Today, the editorial board has been partly decimated, and the magazine is plagued by huge financial debts. Is one of the last heirs of French satirical tradition in danger of vanishing? After the bloody attack, many forces appear to come together in an attempt to keep it alive and kicking.
And we're joined now by I-24 News reporter Daniel Roth for a discussion of the economic story behind Charlie Hebdo in a special Media Watch. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So what is the economic history, the track record of Charlie Hebdo?
Well, not great, actually. The magazine was started in 69-70, and just a little more than 10 years later went under. So in the early 80s, it went under in 80-81. And for 10 years, it was out of business entirely. Right. And only in 1992, as we heard, did it come back. In the early 90s, it came back, and it's been out since. But it's not. It wasn't actually a big deal, I should say. It's going to be a big deal. It wasn't, though. Yeah. It sold around. It had a circulation of about 50,000 copies, compared to their larger competitor, which was 10 times that size, about 500,000 per issue. Now, I say that up until now, this was true because it was just reported a few minutes ago by The Guardian that the next issue of Charlie Hebdo is going to have 1 million copies. Right. So what we were seeing previous to this was a magazine that was small, that went under for many, many years, that was at risk of going under over and over again. In November, they actually were crowdfunding for support. So it wasn't a stable industry. It wasn't a stable magazine in an unstable industry. It was basically based on the vision, so to speak, of these caricature giants, if you want, who were behind it from the beginning. Isn't that true? Right. And so one of the things viewers may not understand off the bat is that in France, satire is ironically on a pedestal, because satire's job, particularly in France, is to cut people down from pedestals. Right. But satire is a very serious, again, ironically, mode of communication, medium, and so this was in that tradition. It was something that giants put together, but it wasn't doing so great. It was. I sort of see it as this, counterculture movement, so to speak. It almost seems like it would go against what it really aims to be if it were to be a popular, how shall I put it, successful, economically successful establishment. Right, and one of the interesting things is that tragedy often can create success on an economic scale. So, I say that with a grain of salt. It's not success, it's tragedy. Right. But that can be spun into something different. For example, eBay is selling this week's copy of Hebdo for hundreds of dollars right now. There's people, not eBay, people are bidding on this for hundreds of dollars now. Why? Because tragedy struck, and because it became an item to get. It's a moment in history for people now, and so it's worth 10 or hundreds of times more. I mean, this right here basically says it all. The fact that everybody, who has any kind of name, certainly in the public sphere, so to speak, comes out with something like this, it makes a statement, it makes it hot, so to speak. The whole magazine has been turned around from it. So what you're saying before, this idea that this is supposed to be a counterculture and it's becoming the culture, it's a very interesting, and we're going to see how this all unfolds. Okay. Well, Daniel Roth, thanks for joining us on that. Thank you.
Agriculture in the Gaza Desert Strip has been beset by environmental and geopolitical challenges for decades. And since the takeover of Hamas in 2006 and the destruction of Israeli greenhouses following the disengagement has all but vanished. Daniel Roth has the details.
Flower fields growing in Gaza were once a common sight, but that image is disappearing. The Dutch government had been supporting the flower economy since 2010. But last year, in the wake of last summer's destruction by Israeli forces for lack of growing results, funds were stopped. There are no exports today, but in 2007, exports brought in $7 million.
The industry of planting and exporting flowers is not worthwhile anymore for the Palestinian farmer, because planting a dunam of flowers costs around $10,000. In the past, the government used to fund 60% of the cost for each dunam, which is around $5,000 support for the farmer. Last year, the funding was only $700 for each farmer.
The Hiazi family depended on these crops, and today they are in dire straits.
I lost over $60,000. This is what is left from debts to pay. My land is gone, all my property is gone. I sold everything. I was forced to sell everything. Today I received a court order, an imprisonment order. My house will be confiscated.
Farmers say that the Israeli blockade is at the root of their suffering. Add to that the destruction of smuggling tunnels with Egypt, and the reality is that the economy in Gaza has dried up. Power and fuel shortages make the situation that much harder. Today, over 38% of Palestinians of Gaza are unemployed. This despair is illustrated by the recent story of a 17-year-old Palestinian who tried to cross the Rafah border into Egypt and was shot dead by the Egyptian army.
Joining us in the studio now is I-24 News reporter Ayman Sikzak for a discussion of the struggling Gazan economy in Financial Bazaar. Ayman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Binyamin. Good to be here.
So, tell us a little bit more about the horticulture, the flower industry in Gaza. I mean, we heard a lot before, during Gush Katif, so to speak, about the greenhouses and stuff. What is the situation in Gaza when it comes to the Palestinian community and the flower industry?
Well, the situation right now is quite dire. I really wanted to kick off the first Financial Bazaar of 2015 by bringing in flowers from Gaza, but I can't.
Right.
And the reason is that this industry that used to bring in about $13 million a year from exports of flowers to around different places around the world has now halted to almost zero.
Right.
And different things were aiding the Gaza export, specifically of flowers, mainly the EU and the Netherlands, who are investing a lot of money in the flower exports from Gaza. But because the recent year and the conflict with Israel in the Gaza Strip, and it's interesting that most of these farmers who raise flowers and cultivate flowers for a living are not exactly in the Gaza Strip. The farms aren't in the Gaza Strip, but a lot of times they live there, the farmers themselves, and have been damaged. So because business has slowed down, investment, foreign investment, which they depended on, has also slowed down. So it's a very, very heavy damage for the flower industry.
Curious, considering, that you mentioned the Netherlands, which, is obviously a huge flower industry in and of itself.
Right.
The fact that they would essentially subsidize, would you call it a subsidy?
Absolutely. They depended on it because Gaza actually, 3% of its turnover, entire turnover from exports, comes from flowers.
Right.
And the Netherlands and the EU at large, through their different funds for humanitarian aid, have been supporting the Gaza Strip's flower exports for years now. But it's changed dramatically over the past year.
I see. Where are all the other funds coming from, so to speak? Considering that, say, the Netherlands is no longer putting as much money into the flower industry, where is money coming from? Within the Middle East, or,
Well, the situation right now is it's not really coming. At least that's what the Interior Minister, the Palestinian Interior Minister, is saying. So despite the fact that Turkey, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates have pledged a lot of money to the Gaza reconstruction project, they say that very little has come in. And what has come in from Turkey has been specifically for humanitarian aid, generating electricity, helping people just pick up right after the conflict in Gaza, but not for actual reconstruction.
Right.
It's not clear why, although there are analysts who say that different conflicts within these countries, between them, like Qatar and Turkey, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, political differences between them are preventing them from participating together in the construction, and who's suffering now is the Gazan economy.
Of course, at the end of the day, the politics essentially is what smothers the whole situation in Gaza.
Exactly, and what we see here is how interrelated politics and money are.
Okay, I see. And what else do you have to say about Gaza then?
Well, some good news to end with. A big Coca-Cola factory is scheduled to open in Gaza. A lot of machinery has already come in. They're expecting it to be installed by March.
Right.
The factory will probably launch this year and employ about 360 Palestinians. A $20 million investment. So a nice optimistic prospect to end with, and hopefully more good things this year.
Well, Ayman Siksak, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Binyamin.
Well, that concludes our Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports at I24 News. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Follow me on Twitter at Tjong-Alvares. Send us your comments and join us again tomorrow.